Hello everyone and welcome to, this is not really the first video. I already did upload a video on using your Garmin dog tracking collar for search and rescue, but this is going to basically be the number one because it's going to be the basic on how to get your track logs off of your Garmin handheld and onto your computer, and from there how to export it into a file that you can send to the requesting agency with your search report so that they have that track log in their records. And the great thing about that is when you get multiple dogs sending their track logs in, they can import them all into the same map and see how much area has been covered and how thickly that area has been covered. I am starting out at the desktop. Basecamp is your friend. It's not everyone's favorite, but in this case, this is one of the best uses of Basecamp is getting the tracks off of your handheld and doing a little bit of track manipulation to get rid of extra data, splitting tracks, and getting that export out for your file. So the first thing I'm going to do is plug my handheld into the computer USB port. You should have a cord, and I'm going to give it a second. It does take a minute for it to register, and Windows will pop up and say, hey, you just added a device. And in the meantime, I'm going to go ahead and start Basecamp. It does seem to help better if you go ahead and plug the device in first. Garmin likes it a lot better if you do that. So now that I am in Basecamp, I'll give you a quick overview of everything that we can see in here. First thing, Basecamp always has this ribbon up here. It says, right now it says it's got new tracks on your Astro 320. I never use that, I usually get rid of it. So what you're looking at right now is a map that actually is showing pretty much everything that is in my Basecamp collection. That's on my computer, it's not on my handheld. So up here on the left-hand side, I have my library, my collection, and then I have my folders that I've created on my own. So I have like, this folder is for like things like these videos, and I have a folder for all the missions I've been on, and I have a training folder. I try to be organized, so that's how I do it. As you scroll down on here, we're going to actually end up on the devices menu. And you can see that Basecamp has found my Astro 320 unit. The folder that we're interested in right now is under your device, Astro 320, or whatever handheld you plugged in. And you're going to go in your internal storage folder. So I actually do a pretty decent job of clearing tracks off of my handheld, and I know there's some of you out there that don't, so this might be way bigger of a list and a way messier map here. So it does behoove you to clear tracks and delete them off of your handheld after you've downloaded them onto your computer and saved them elsewhere. It also really, really helps anyone at Ops that's downloading tracks off of your handheld. So let's say that I'm at Ops right now and I just plugged in this dog handler's handheld and I have all these lines going everywhere. I have multiple tracks on here. I have no idea. Today is January 15th and I'm looking at a current track that says October 25th. So I know there's a bunch of data on here that is absolutely unnecessary, and you will do your operations managers such a service by clearing your tracks off of your handheld when you are finished downloading them onto your computer. I highly recommend you do this every time you use it. So anyway, back to what we're doing here. I've plugged in the GPS unit to the computer. I've opened Basecamp. I'm looking at the internal storage. I have multiple dates on this track. You can see that it's from October 25th. It's January 15th. So I actually haven't really recorded a bunch of tracks, but there's a lot of different dates in between here. So I double clicked on the current track and I opened it up. When you open the track, it will also highlight the track that you have the window open for. You can also highlight tracks just by selecting them. That's a single click on each one, so you can go through and just look at each different track that you have on here. And the current track is actually the one I'm going to use today because I want to go ahead and split up all these different tracks so that you can see how that's done. The other thing we're going to do is we're going to end up getting rid of a bunch of these lines, and that will really clean things up so that once that you've saved all of these in your folders over here, then you can select the one that you want to send to the law enforcement agency with your search report. So there's two ways to open the track list. The track list is every single point that was recorded on that track. So you can either double click over here, which I did the first time, or you can come over here to this bubble and just click on it. It highlights it, it underlines when you hover over it. So now that I'm looking at the track list over here, your index points, these index numbers are every time the unit recorded your location. So you can see like the first one, I moved 43 feet, then I moved 7 feet, then I moved 22 feet, etc. There's a lot of points in this list. Okay, I mean, I'm getting real close to 10,000 points here between all of these dates. I'm pointing that out because there's a really good reason to get rid of as much as you can without wrecking your track, your actual track. So today, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and split up all of these dates. So I actually have 1025, 1026, 1120, 1128, 1223, 1226, and today 1115. I will say that using the slider bar is highly recommended. Actually grabbing and dragging the slider. If you are using this, it's going to take you forever. If you're using your scroll wheel, it's going to take you forever. As you can see, I'm still on 1025 and I've scrolled it a bunch. So the slider bar comes really in handy for figuring this out. What I'm looking at here is this column right here, the time column. It has your date and time of the recordings of each of these index points. So I'm just going to go ahead and use the slider bar to get down to the next date, which if I remember right, was 1026. Yep, there it is. So I got down to it. I'm going to have to go back up a little bit. In that case, I'm going to use slow scrolling or, this wheel. Now that I'm here, the other way that you can find these splits in where you want to split the track, usually it can be your leg distance. You can see that I moved all of a sudden very quickly 10.6 miles in 2 points. So from this point to this point, I moved 10.6 miles, which actually coincides with my date. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select that one and I'm going to right click on it and I am going to select divide. So what that did is it split the track into two. So I actually ended up, one of the things that Basecamp will do is whichever one that you divided it on will end up on both tracks on either side of the split. So I want to remove this. I'm going to go ahead and take this off because it's from 1025. I don't need it. And watch over here when I do this, it's going to drop one of these lines. I don't know which one, but it will drop one of these lines. So I just dropped a line here. Now, the rest, because this is the secondary portion of the split, I still have several days on this track, so I'm going to do the same thing again. I'm going to go down to the next date, which is 11/20, and I'm going to go ahead and split this. We got a 15-mile difference here that happened in 25 days. So make sure you don't hit delete, hit divide, and now it's removed another one of those lines. And I'm going to go ahead and remove this point. Sorry, it didn't remove the line yet. Now it will remove the line. And I'm going to go to the next date, which is 11/28, and split it again, and remove that extra point, which will get rid of the line. And I think I have 3 or 4 more of these to do, so I'll just do that real quick. Once again, I select the one with the gigantic distance, right click it, select divide, and delete the gigantic distance to get rid of that line. I think I have one more here. And I am using delete. I'm using the delete key on the keyboard to delete that, but you can also right click on it and select delete. It will just delete that one. So I do have one more because after I was done training today, I came home and I turned on the GPS so I can go down to the bottom and find that one. Hopefully, yep, see, now I can look at the time for this, or I can look over here in the leg distance. So I've got a 37-mile distance, but I also jumped from 4 o'clock in the afternoon to 9 p.m. So I can actually, instead of splitting this, because I don't care about my track sitting here at the computer desk, I can just hold down the shift key and go to the very bottom, the very last one, and select it. And it'll select not just that line and the last point at which I recorded a point at training, but it will also select all of the extra junk that's down here from when I've been sitting here on the computer. So you can highlight them all and right click and delete, or you can just hit the delete key on the keyboard. It's up to you, user preference. And now I've got rid of that point. So now I'm going to go close that window and I look over here and now I've got all these tracks. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm actually going to delete everything else that's on here because I have already downloaded everything previous to this video, but also I can delete everything that shows up in Basecamp on the internal storage, and it'll delete from this list, but it's not going to delete off of the Astro 320. I don't know about any of the other models, but it will not delete off the Astro 320 just because I deleted it from this list on the computer. So like I said, I've downloaded a bunch of this stuff earlier. It didn't change anything on the handheld. You have to physically go into the handheld unit and go in the menu and delete tracks from there. So I'm just going to go ahead and get rid of, yeah, I'll get rid of everything. Now I have several different days. They're really hard to see on this map, but I can just open this one and it will zoom in to that track. And it looks like this is a different color. The dark green is actually hawk working. So I have an extra track on here, and that's fine because then I can show you the difference between the dog and the handler. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here. This is 11/20. I always rename everything using a date format because, well, for obvious reasons, it's really easy to be organized that way. But the other thing is that Basecamp's actually is super finicky about your track names, waypoint names, everything else. If you duplicate a name, it's not going to let you. So you want to figure out a naming format that works for you that's going to give you, everything's going to be unique. It doesn't matter if it's in this folder over here, if it's in the unlisted data folder, the missions folder, the training folder, it doesn't matter. Basecamp hates having duplicates. So especially on waypoints, because if you delete the waypoints off of your handheld unit, it's going to start over at 001, which means that when you go into Basecamp, it's actually going to load your waypoint number as it usually will do 0001 or 0011. It will rename all of everything for you if you don't already have a unique name attached to it. So that being said, that is part of why I use a date format besides organization. I also, this is actually Hawk's track, so I'm going to put Hawk's name on it. And I'm going to go ahead and close that. So it looks like, based on what we're looking at right here, this is going to be, this light green track is going to be my track from that same day, which turns out to be track 02. And it looks like I have a jump there. So I probably, since I split it by dates already, I'm going to say that on this occasion, I actually ended up working 2 different areas on the same day. And that's actually something that can happen on a mission. It happens often in training if you set up a couple different areas to work in. And also, if you're using your handheld to or leave it on in your pack when you're walking along with another handler, it's going to record that and you'll end up with that on your handheld as well. So I'll show you how to split that up. The other thing I want to do also, and actually I'll do that real quick. So I'm going to go ahead and relabel, or I'm going to split this track. I'm sorry, I'm tired. I've been in the woods all day today in the snow and the wind, and it was beautiful, but it was cold. So one of the things that I use to figure out, I already split this by date, so you can use the time to figure out where to split it. But if you move from one problem to the next one and there's only like a few minutes in between, you're probably not going to see that by looking at the time, because I went from like 11:54 to 12:05. The other way to do this is you can look for a leg distance. So there should be a half a mile or something in there. That might also be really hard to split or to spot on your list. So what I like to do is actually just drop my, is get this point highlighted here. So this is where I parked, and then I worked this problem, came back to the car, and then I turned off the handheld and drove over to the other problem. So this is going to be my point starting from the car, and I'm going to go through this, and this is actually pretty short. It looks like there's a lot of, all these little dots are all of these indexes, but it'll go through this pretty quickly. So what I do is I just highlight the first one on this list, and I use the arrow key on my keyboard, and you can see this little yellow point highlighter over here is moving as I'm arrow keying through the list. And I'll just hold the arrow key down until I get it. This is also really fun to do when you're reviewing your track, is to just watch how, like, did you stop somewhere, watching the dog work with it, and it's kind of like a replay. So it looks like I came back to the car here. I can see that I probably actually came back to the car here on this point to the index 211, because that's where I went from going approximately 20 feet per point recorded to 1 or 2 feet. So I arrived back at the car. So I can go here, and then I can just arrow key through, and you can actually see that this isn't moving very much as I'm doing this, because I'm still standing here at the car. And I'm going to show you something else that's very important on this in just a second. But as I'm arrow keying down, I'm watching this to see when it jumps to the next area, because that's where I'm going to split it. And it does seem like it takes forever, but once you get to that point, your little thing will disappear because it just jumped up off the map where I have it here. And you can see here we have a jump of 0.7 miles. So I'm actually going to split my track right here. So same as I did for splitting dates, you select the one you split it on, right click, go to divide. So now I have another track, and because I'm kind of wanting to keep track of where I'm at with all of these tracks that I've split up, I'm just going to go ahead and relabel this right now. This is my track from 11/20 in 2021, mine, and then because this one over here was my first problem and the one that I'm looking at right now is my second problem, I'm going to go ahead and just drop a P2 for problem 2 and leave it at that. And also because I've done a lot of training out here at this area, like these other line, this big long line is from another training I did here. I'm just going to change the color so that I can keep track of this date. So I'm actually going to change both of them to magenta for 11/20. But first, I'm going to get rid of that line. So you can see I have this gigantic line in between problems, and I can just delete that and it's gone. Now I just have this track from 11/20, that is the second problem, and then I've got this track down here, which I just split from, and that was also 11/20, and mine, but this was problem 1. And I'm going to make that magenta also so that I have it for the same date. Now, you remember how I spent a whole bunch of time at the car after I finished this problem down here? I'm actually going to go ahead and get rid of all of that because right now we have 334 points on this list and I can get rid of a bunch of them. So I'm just going to go ahead and look at this. Watch this cursor, watch this highlighted point move as I run through the list. Now I will say that if you click on the map when you're doing this, it changes what your arrow keys on your keyboard are going to apply to. So if you have the map active and not this window, it's going to move your map when you use the arrow keys. So if you start doing that, it's because this window is not active, and you can actually tell because this is highlighted in gray. So as soon as I reactivate this window, it's going to turn blue, and now I'm using my arrow keys to go through this list. So it looks like I walked around the car once or twice, and I'm just scrolling back up until I start moving on my track again. So now I've moved, and I can just go back down to that point where I arrived back at the car. And I'm at 212. So I'm going to leave that point highlighted, and I'm just going to drag this to the end, hold the shift key down, select the last one. It collects everything in between. You can see over here on the track, it highlighted it in orange, and that's not really part of my working track, so I feel fine with getting rid of that. You can either, again, right click and hit the delete key, or select delete, or you can hit the delete key on your keyboard to get rid of all that extra stuff. So now I have that track split, and I have 2 problems labeled for this day. And you can see now that I have mine and Hawks, and it looks like I probably also walked out with someone on another track because I don't have a dog track log that coincides with it. And it also kind of looks like the dog went out without me. He didn't. I probably just lost batteries on the GPS. Well, that's probably not true because otherwise I wouldn't have recorded him. Or I left my GPS at the car while he was working this problem over here. This kind of looks like a moose, actually. Anyway, so what I want to do is, now that I have this date split up, I have my 11/20 track for Hawk, and I have my 11/20 track for me. I have 2 of them actually because I also have this guy down here. I'm going to go ahead and send these to a training list so that I can keep this and This is going to transfer it. Remember, we're still on the internal storage of the handheld. This is going to move this onto my computer. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a list. I already have actually put this in my training, so I don't really want to add another folder there, but what I have is this extra folder, which is where I'm putting all of my training video stuff. So I right-clicked on the folder, and I want to go down here and select New List. So now I have a new list, and I'm going to label it for this training day, 2021, 11/20. And then for me, I usually put the location where we were training, which is Lori State Park. And then once you have that, you can hit enter, or you can just click anywhere and it'll get out of the edit mode. It moved up here. It did jump up here because these things come in alphabetically, so it's got the earliest date and then it goes down in alphabet. So this list is blank. When you saw that I created this list, my tracks disappeared off of here. And that's because I'm not looking at the internal storage anymore. So I'm going to go back to the internal storage and my track showed up. And what I want is these guys that are magenta. So there's a couple ways that you can select this. You can either select them over here, which is highly recommended because Basecamp's kind of a pain to use sometimes. You can either select all three of them by holding the shift key, clicking the first and last. You can select the first one, hold control, and select each one. Like if you needed to select these three and track 7, that would leave out everything that's in between. And the other way that you can do this is to go to the area on the map and come up here and use your select tool. It's up on the toolbar. It's the arrow. I don't really like using this method because I always forget to get out of the select tool and then I want to like pan around on the map and it frustrates me. So now that I have the select tool, I can just click anywhere within these tracks and just select the area that includes the tracks that I want to collect, and it's going to select Hawk's track. It should have also selected mine, but I might not have selected enough of that, so I'm actually just going to do this and go like this, but see, now it's also grabbed that one. So this can be a difficult way of doing things, but you can select it just on the map. So if I wanted everything that's in here in Lori State Park, then I could just drag Lori State Park and it's going to grab everything that I have in here. So I do still definitely recommend just selecting it on your list over here. So that being said, I now have selected the 11/20 track points. I'm going to right click and I'm going to do a send to, and it's going to bring up this extra window. It's going to show me my library, and I created this list right here, this Lori State Park list, specifically for this. So I'm going to just click once and select it and then hit OK. And up here you can see it's loading those tracks into this. It gets a little green check mark when it's done. Now I can go to this list that I created that has just these 11/20 tracks on it. If I want to send this to law enforcement, you know, if I was doing this as a mission and these are the 2 areas that I worked, I can export this. So I'm going to export this. You go to File, Export, and then you can either export the list. So this list is called 2021 11/20 Lori State Park. Or if you, let's say this was like a warm-up problem down here and then this is your actual search area up in the north area, you can just select just those 2 by using your control. Again, you just control select. And now if I go up to the export, I can either export the entire list or it can export the selection. So the selection is just those 2 tracks. So if I export the selection, it's going to ask me where I want to send it to. And it's just like saving any other file where you want to go in and navigate to the place where you want to leave it. And I have, this says selected data from. I don't really need that in the file name, so I can get rid of that. The other thing, I recommend doing this in 2 formats, so you're actually going to do this twice, is using the GPX format. This is a format that almost everything can use, even Google Earth can use it, although it does like the KML file better. Whatever file you decide to use, I do recommend the GPX file or the KML file. The CSVs can be imported too. It's just the KML file and the GPX file are kind of native, I guess you could call it, to mapping. So I always save a GPX file, and then you can also do export as a KML file. Now again, that's changing this file type down here, so it's going to change it to a KML. And it looks like I already have one in this folder. KML, you can see here the Google Earth icon because that's what it likes. So now I've exported a couple files, and what I would do with those is when I finish writing up my report for the mission, I can take those files and I can include them in the attachments of the email to law enforcement. And I'm actually going to do another video on everything that I do when I finish a mission and send to law enforcement, which is going to include the GPX file, a really kind of a brief overview of a report, and I also usually will print out a map into a PDF file, or if I'm actually turning in paperwork, I'll print it out on the printer, but I print a map into a PDF file so that they can use that. Now, I was actually trying to pan, and like I said earlier, I have the stupid select tool highlighted, so I couldn't pan. I was going to go back to the internal storage. Now, when I moved those and sent them over to my training list, they're still here on the internal storage list, and I'm actually just going to get rid of them so that they're not confusing things here. And what I want to do is I'm actually not going to mess with track 1 because that is a different area, but I want to go back to Lori where I had all these other tracks. And track 3 is the one that is not the one that I just split up. It's, again, I did 2 different areas. I actually have several of those. We kind of do that a lot. So track 3 is, and then track 6. So it looks like track 5, track 7, and track 4 are elsewhere. And I don't really care about those, so I'm just going to get rid of them. So we got track 5, get rid of that one. And then track 6 and track 3 are the ones here, so I can get rid of 7. So just like with the other tracks that I did, rename, splitting first is usually the easiest thing to do. You can actually just change the color on this before you do anything, and that will help you keep them sorted even after you split them. So now that I've changed the color, I'll go ahead and split this track. So once again, I can zoom in on this. This was my first problem down here. You can tell by the directional arrows on the track. And one of the other ways that you can quickly find on your list where you want to split it is by clicking that part of the track. So it jumped me down here to index number 634, and I can scroll up or down. So if I scroll up, it looks like I'm going backwards on my track. If I scroll down, I'm going forward. And there's my jump right there. So that's where I'm going to divide it. So select, right click, divide, and now I have that track split, and this what I have highlighted and open in the window now is the second problem. So I'm going to get rid of that line. So I just come over here and I delete it. And the line's gone now. I have it split into two different areas that I worked that particular day. So I think I pretty much went ahead and got everything on this video, and it's getting to be pretty lengthy, so I'm going to stop there. If you guys have anything that you want covered, if you have questions, or if you have suggestions, or if you know something about this that I don't know, like the whole start a new hunt thing, go ahead and drop a comment. And if you know me personally, you are certainly welcome to email me or text me. And many of you know me on Facebook and Instagram, so hit me up if you have any questions, comments, or suggestions. And I hope you all have great training, beautiful weather, and may you have all of the finds.